Good evening, everyone. This is Sanctuary, episode 29 by Gnoshery Libertas on July 11th, 2022. I am Marcia. I'm without my partner tonight, but hopefully he will have a stable internet connection soon and be back with us shortly. Last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, our last call was on mastering emotions. And I don't know about you guys, but I have had a lot of opportunities to practice what Spirit brought through over these last 2 weeks. There's definitely been a lot coming up on the collective level, but also on the individual levels for us to really sit with, be with, and kind of use some of the supporting energies that Spirit gave 2 weeks ago to really help us stay rooted and as kind of also allowing us to sway with the breeze so that we aren't toppling in all of these energies that are going on around us. And I had written on my paper last call, saying like 2 weeks ago, the last call was mastering emotions. And as I was meditating here, I heard like last call, bars closing. You don't got to go home, but you can't stay here. And it was this feeling from Spirit, like this victim martyr spiral that we have kind of been endlessly circling, this wheel of doom, if you want to call it. We are being asked to master this now, to recognize that a true spiritual being is actually never in a state of victimtude. Because actually, yes, Mitzi said, like bamboo. Absolutely. We are being encouraged to really stay strong and also to understand that if we do kind of keep dipping our toe or our whole body dunk in this victim martyr spiral, it's going to get increasingly more and more comfortable or uncomfortable, because the boomerang effect, this buffer of time space that we used to have that kind of protected us from understanding that we were the creator of our reality, because we weren't understanding that our thoughts and our emotions were actually creating the things that were coming back to us in our field, that is no longer going to be available to us. It's going to boomerang right back in our face if we are out of alignment. And so we are really encouraged to take the practices and build practices of our own that allow us to really sit with the fullness of the human emotional spectrum, because in the mastering of that within ourselves, it's going to allow us to offer a presence to the world that brings a brilliance and a radiance that hasn't been seen in a very, very long time on this planet. And I'm hearing from the Christed souls, it's going to be seen in a more awe-inspiring way than it has ever been experienced before by any soul. So we have this high frequency that we are moving into at the very same time that we are kind of shaking the rug out and releasing all of this debris. And so, when we take that dust out, all the air is filled for a time, and it's really hard to see through the clouds. And so it can get very easy to fall into that depression or that despair or that low frequency place that kind of keeps us in that feeding frenzy of the archons, like we've talked about in previous calls, rather than in that place of the master, which is where Spirit is leading and guiding us. The very first lyrics, and I think the only lyrics for tonight, were no regrets. Everything will work out fine. We'll hold our breath, wait for another sign. And this feeling that as we reflect on the really human parts of our lives that we are beginning to bring into mastery, we're going to look back on things that we thought were perhaps like traumas or woundings or things that brought us shame in a way that we thought maybe we couldn't overcome. Spirit is going to give us this best friend perspective that allows us to see through this life review that there are no regrets. In fact, everything we did was perfect. And the things that we did that were not in alignment, we are gifted these little lessons, these little do-overs, these course corrections where Spirit will kind of humorously and amusingly and lovingly guide us into the decision we could have made that would have brought love forth. And because there is no time and space, any choice that we have made, past or future, can always be rectified in this now moment. So no regrets, everything will work out fine. We hold our breath and we wait for another sign. And that sign is we're waiting on the activation from our weave to tell us what our next step is. We are not mentally projecting ourselves forward. We are instead staying in a space of active receptivity. And that means waiting, patiently waiting. And what does that mean to the human? Well, it means doing our best to trust that what is ours cannot be missed, that we are always walking toward it. Of course, we can do some self-destructive behaviors and some sabotaging along the way, but it is always there for us in escrow. And so Spirit wants us to remember that and to know that we are always being guided when we are in that receptive state. The song that these lyrics came from was Bittersweet Faith. And Spirit really highlighted that humanity has this kind of bittersweet faith right now. We kind of know deep in our core that we are moving somewhere beautiful and exciting, but we're also like, what the hell is going on? There's this journey that we are taking to get there. The process is very bittersweet for the human because we are experiencing this high and this low and this within and without. And Spirit is just acknowledging that from Spirit's perspective, it is all beautiful and amusing and wonderful, but from ours, it can often feel like this bittersweet faith. And our light transmission tonight is actually the theme, the shakedown. And it goes kind of in alignment with what Spirit was saying with the fact that we cannot exist in these victim spirals anymore. We can't exist in our stories without them coming to kind of slap us in the face. In fact, the very first phrase to come through the reading was, "The buck stops here." And I felt like Spirit wanted me to dig into that a little deeper to get like, what is the meaning on that phrase specifically? And what came through in all capital letters is, the ultimate responsibility is mine. And Spirit addressed this as the need to take a responsibility, that which many others would just pass on to someone else. So it's the feeling of taking on a responsibility that others would very quickly give away or not want to carry the cloak or the mantle. And yet we're once again reminded that if we are true spiritual beings, true soulful beings, that we have to understand that we are always in co-creatorship with our life, that nothing is ever happening to us. It's always happening through us and for us when we are given the eyes to see. And all we need to do is ask for those. Of course, in the moment of trauma and suffering, that's often very, very hard to do. But we are encouraged to remember that the buck stops here with us. And this shakedown is all about not only us taking individual ultimate responsibility for ourselves, but the collective taking responsibility for the decisions that we have made over time and space that have not been in alignment with love. And this is not only on this planet, but multidimensionally throughout the multiverse. And once again, Spirit reminds that this is the need to take responsibility that many others would just pass off or shirk off. So it's a larger mantle than what we might say is an individual responsibility. I'm going to take a moment of pause to let that settle. And if there's anything that wants to come up in the chat or that you want to bring forward, please feel free to do so. Moving forward, Spirit wants us to know that our personal relationship with God is everything and the only thing. I had to kind of underline that in red several times, that moving forward, all else will be swept away. And I'm reminded of that vision that came, gosh, I don't even remember when, somewhere between November and February. I know I started talking about it individually before we started talking about it on the call here, but there was a feeling from Spirit that all adults that were not aligned with their inner wisdom, there was a storm coming. There was a wave of energy coming. I remember feeling it like I was in a cornfield and there was like some natural force coming that was going to flatten everything in its sight, except for the children, the animals, and the adults, which were standing in their authenticity, in their true power. And that doesn't mean coming from a place of I'm a this person or I'm a that person. It was people who, when all was stripped away, like when natural events happen, earthquakes or tsunamis, the people that step forward to be the helpers in those moments, those are the people that Spirit is speaking to here as being the ones that are left upright. And in the meditation, it was called The Great Leveling, the end of titles, roles, and nobilities. And I had written like earthquake in parentheses here, not to say that there's an earthquake happening physically, but that there's an earthquake happening metaphysically, where we are having to kind of loose all of these costumes that we have worn, these identities that we have worn that, have paid the bills or have allowed us to feel like we have a passion or an art or a creative outlet or simply, just a way to express ourselves in this world. And anything that is not truly aligned with who we really are is going to be released in this spiritual process. And yet Spirit says what we receive in return is our divine inheritance. And my friend Mimi today was typing to me and something sent this a space and she said, oh, my return key is kind of doing its own thing. And as I was reading return key, Spirit was like, this is the return key. Like, this is the key back to your divine inheritance, and it is in your hand. And we just have to remember that it's not ever going to come from outside of us. It's always going to come from within. And the last energy that Spirit really wanted to speak to around this particular collective and personal individual shakedown is that the mother, father, and divine child energy, the trinity of what we might call soul, spirit, and personality or human, are now going to be in remembrance of the original divine trinity, the 3 in 1. And what Spirit means here is that on this earth, God has allowed itself to personify into masculine, into feminine, and also into a divine child self. And yet, due to the fall and due to the distortions that we have experienced throughout this experience of what we're calling time space, we have had a distorted father and we have had a distorted mother. And of course, we all know what happens when you have distorted mother and father energies. The child then has trauma, and we are all that divine child, and we are also all that mother and father. And so the 3 parts of ourselves are going to begin coming up from within us to allow us to know them. And they may not come in those names or even in those feelings, but we will know them as our own soul, spirit, and human parts that are merging together, as Spirit said, into that master self. And when we are in this remembrance of the divine trinity, we are also living and walking as that prayer. So what does this all mean? Well, Spirit says we're remembering our creatorship, our spiritual beings. Once again, we do not live within victimhood as we understand the motivation and the purpose of creation, even if our personality self appears to be suffering. So when we are harnessing this perspective, yeah, we might get pissed, we might have the feelings come up because we are human. It's not like they just poof, go away, that you don't feel the fear or the anger, the rage, the sadness, the grief. But we don't stay within a space of victimhood. We kind of allow it to move through us as a waterfall, and we ask our inner self to understand, like, why is this happening? What is the motivation? What is the purpose of this creation? Because my God, like, my human self is really freaking struggling here. And Spirit will always answer. Our soul will always answer. But it will require us to take full responsibility for every choice, action, and reaction that is occurring in our lives. And here in meditation, the question came through from the masses. So if there's a war going on or a mass shooting, I'm supposed to take personal responsibility for that? And here Spirit replied, individual personal responsibility, no, but collective responsibility, yes. What we choose to witness, we have had a hand in creating at a more expanded level. And from this space, we understand which collective challenges best suit our individual soul's evolution, and our consciousness enters this dreamscape. So what Spirit means by that is, when we enter this physical reality, this physical dimension, we're going to choose a point in the time-space continuum or the eternal now where we can get the best bang for a buck, where we're going to have the most soul evolution in the shortest period of time. And that might be entering a war zone. That might be having experiences on the human level that feel less than divine. Spirit says, however, only those who choose the soul path of, quote, wearing the sins of the world will use their own personal will to transmute the greater collective karma and soul trauma, thus pulling all souls through the eye of the needle. And we hear about that often with who the collective calls Jesus. You know, Jesus died to save our sins. Well, what that really means is a master soul came and took all the debris that was shaken out of the rug and said, I'm going to clean this up for you guys, but please don't screw it up anymore because I'm out. Right. And we all know that people love getting stuff under that rug. So there are souls on this planet who have chosen the volunteer soul path of, quote, wearing the sins of the world. And for a time in their lives, you know, these are usually very empathic, sensitive, intuitive beings. They may feel overwhelmed or overburdened by this, you know, mission or duty. But once again, it goes back to, are you the creator of your life on every level? And if you are, maybe this is asking you to stand up and fight again. Maybe this is asking you to take on the perspective of an MMA fighter, you know, where you are knocked down, but if you're out, you're out, you know, like the prize is no longer yours. And so there's this feeling from spirit that no matter what path of soul that we have chosen to get to this level of mastery, no matter how much suffering or trauma we have created, when we remember that it's the soul that has designed this and the personality is the one who is experiencing it, we are able to then help them merge together, where one becomes a parent consciousness to the other and allows it to have the grace to expand with the perspective that's going to allow for peace. So before I go on, I'm going to open up the floor. One of the major themes coming up in individual readings throughout the month of July and June has been expect the unexpected. And I think the ego self, or at least mine, is like, what? Like, that doesn't sound good. And yet spirit kept coming through with this feeling of like, you know, the unexpected could be really awesome. It could be something that you've never imagined. It could be something you never even would have thought, you know, think to imagine. And so the energy came through of Pandora's gift, that we need to trust that source is all gifted and all giving. And in asking the questions, we are triggering the process of bringing the answers forward. Spirit says sometimes it is through our uncomfortable learning that we find our treasure, and it may take us to places that our human selves feel like the end of the world. So once again, Spirit is acknowledging that from the human level, this does not feel like a divine, fun purpose, a little mission, feels like shit. But to the spirit and to the soul, they are able to help guide the human through these harder times. Spirit says not all is lost in this process. In fact, what is stripped away leaves only the core self remaining. This is activation for new revelation, new life, and new adventure. And we're being asked to surrender any misplaced guilt that we may have brought upon ourselves or another through believing that we created some terrible happening. And this is where those life reviews come through in such a beautiful way. And when you have one, you will know, because you feel it in every cell of your body. You are never punished. You are never judged. You might be poked and made fun of a little bit for some of the decisions you've made, but it's all in love and it's all in beauty. And all of this shame and this misplaced guilt that we bring upon ourselves, it's gone. And in the awe of God, in fact, they talk so often about, you know, being in fear of God, and there's no fear in that place. It's awe. You are just awestruck, and you are in the space of miracle. And in this space, it is so easy to let go of these shame-based beliefs because they're hilarious. They're hilarious. And we can only see it from God's perspective. And so it's in that asking, what Spirit is saying, you know, ask for the guidance, ask for the answers, and trust that they are going to come up in your life. So we're surrendering this misplaced guilt. We're letting go of these shame-based beliefs, this feeling that we need to be in punishment, or that we got to be brought to task over some perceived imperfection that we have. Spirit says we're releasing right now any feeling of inadequacy and our low self-worth. We're freeing our souls from this torment. This is the sign of a new time where we swap the notion of inherent shame for the acceptance of our inherent divinity. So we've all been taught that the divinity is outside of ourselves. And what we're going to discover collectively is that it is inside of ourselves. And Spirit says this sacred rebellion is happening now within the collective soul as a powerful uprising toward liberation. We are breaking free from the power games and the weighty criticisms of the world, including its insane priorities. So if you are out there feeling like, I don't know how to keep up with this, like my body, my nervous system, my mind, you're not meant to. You're meant probably to be creating what's next. Spirit says, dare to disobey anything and everything that is not divine. Be the leader of this next soul revolution. Shrug off the despair, the misery, and the weight that this world brings in. And remember that you are a true bearer of light, peace, comfort, hope, and reassurance to others. We are now casting off the works of anyone who seeks to torment us. And just like Spirit said in that other call, we're really focusing on strengthening our talents, our gifts, and our abilities, especially those that have yet to be acknowledged. And I think a lot of times we think, well, I can't make money at that, or I don't have time for that. And Spirit is saying these talents and abilities, may not be meant for the outer world in that way. Maybe they are, but they do need to be acknowledged, because if they are not acknowledged, they will turn in on us and they will show up as despair and depression and restlessness and kind of feeling like you're never right place, right time. So really honing in on what we came here to offer as a strength is incredibly important right now. Spirit acknowledges that this is a worthy seed of something beautiful and it's necessary. It's arising from within us. And if we choose to develop this seed, it will become an extraordinary light in our lives and within the world. So this has been coming up quite a bit over the last couple of months, this feeling of needing to be in service to something bigger than oneself, that there are many individuals within the collective right now who are feeling that being in service to oneself is it's simply not enough for where we're going, that the soul needs to be fed by something bigger. Take a pause and give space for anyone that wants to bring anything forward. The next supporting energy for this light transmission of the shakedown is strengthening our communication and really being aware of our communication, that it's time to be clear and straightforward with ourselves and with others, and to notice if we're having a difficulty, particularly when it comes to asking for what we need. That was a big theme within this communication piece, is can we ask for what we need? And when we do ask for what we need, are there any other feelings or emotions that rise to the surface that we then kind of have to take a look at? This is a marker which is showing up to remind us that how we speak to the world is how the world will speak back to us. So what we are saying is incredibly important. The word is a spell. It is magic. And it will come back to us, just like that boomerang effect that we talked about. So how we speak to the world is incredibly important. We're encouraged to be clear and to seek clarity in all of our communications, and to not make assumptions about what other people's motivations are, or to take petty action against them. Because once again, that will drop us immediately into that victim martyr spiral, and it's tough to claw your way out of there from that space right now. We're also being encouraged to clarify anything that remains cloudy between you and another. So this goes back to this making assumptions, which often causes much more of a kerfuffle than if we had just addressed it in the moment. So if there's anything that seems unresolved, this is the encouragement from Spirit to have that conversation. That communication right now is timely, and it is highlighted through all areas of our lives. So this is professionally, this is personally, and this is also communication within, communication with our soul, and communication with Spirit in all the ways that Spirit chooses to communicate to us through our daily lives, or what I would call the weave. And this communication, Spirit says, is not just about talking to someone, but also about developing our receptivity and learning how to truly listen. Really listening in deep presence to what other people are saying, rather than having an immediate response prepared before they've even finished the sentence. And also to remain open, like Spirit said just a moment ago, to any spirit communication at this time. To ask and you will know, look and you will see, listen and you will hear, sense and you will feel. God speaks through all things. So when we get in that human space of like, man, like I'm not getting anything. I don't know where to go. Often we just have to kind of shake up and shift the energy just a little bit, take a different route to where you're going than you might normally take, or call someone you haven't talked to in a while, or text them, whatever feels most appropriate to you. But this feeling of just doing something slightly out of the ordinary, this actually kind of gives a signal to Spirit that we are not locked into our habitual patterns, but that we are ready to receive this new adventure that Spirit is speaking to. We have one more theme tonight. I'm going to open it up for any thoughts, comments, questions, and then we can have our tea and cookies afterward. The last supporting energy within this frequency of a collective and personal shakedown is the card that came forward. The phrase was jewel within a teardrop. So this feeling that through this grief or through this period of hardship or challenge, there's actually a treasure. There's a jewel that is being created or crafted or simply revealed. And Spirit wants us to know that we will soon experience, if we have not already, a very strong spiritual and emotional reconnection with our innermost feelings as well as our true nature, which may have been suppressed or ignored for some time. We're also encouraged to remember that this is a deeply emotional time, and it can be very easy to attach to something and to mentally project into the future that this is just the way it's going to be. And, this always happens to me. And, the stories begin. But if we recognize that we're in a deeply emotional time, it's easier to kind of sit back, to allow it to pass through us, to allow it to be that waterfall. And soon Spirit says the sadness, the grief, it shifts into joy. And we're also encouraged that our appreciation, our gratitude for life, for our love, friendships, this strengthens as we begin to give thanks for all the little blessings that happen in our lives. Gratitude is actually a frequency, a wave that you can ride, and it gives you eyes of beauty when you practice it over time. And it becomes almost a force field of love that nothing can penetrate. So we're really encouraged to stay in that frequency of appreciation, to know that we are uniting through common bonds, that the love we feel for another is growing stronger right now and more profound. And if these relationships are not showing up in our life yet, Spirit is letting us know that this is coming. This love is a spiritual and an emotional reconnection. It is a special and magical time, and we're encouraged to savor each and every moment, and to remember that love is all that really matters. So when we choose to shed this density emotionally, physically, mentally, we are going to come to find that there is only one true frequency in the universe, and that is love. So that is what Spirit wanted to bring through tonight. Is there anything that you guys want to bring up before we hop off the recording? If I don't see any hands or anybody unmute, I will close us down for tonight and allow us to move into the next phase. Thank you all for being here to listen to this transmission. Your presence creates this boom that reaches far and wide, and so much more powerful than if I was just sitting here speaking it out into the universe myself. So I just appreciate you so much for being here. All the times that you come to take this out of your schedule, it just really means a lot to me. So thank you so much. I will catch all of you next week. We're going to, those of us on the call, take about 30 seconds to close down the space, and then I will be back to have our after call chat.